Well, first of all, I want to thank Darius and Linda so much for having me here. And after coming here and hearing all the inspiring stories and looking forward to hearing more, I'm so emotional right now from hearing everybody else's stories. And it's amazing to be a part of such a wonderful event with so many great stories. And so thank you for having me here. It's quite different from what I'm used to. The conferences I attend are more serious, and everybody goes to their room at the end of the day, and nobody really interacts. And like Linda said, human interaction is very important. And so I'm going to tell you my story, and I'm going to take a seat here. Anyone who escapes from a war-torn country, they all have stories. And just like them, our family also has a story. And when I was in Afghanistan, I was 5 and I was playing in the playground with my cousin. And we saw a rocket fly over our head. We could usually, figure out the sound. We were already familiar with the sound of a rocket. So as soon as we heard one, we're like, uh-oh. And at that point in time, being 5 years old, knowing what might happen if a rocket hits, it's pretty sad. But at that time, I thought that the whole world was this way. I thought that, I could die today, I could die tomorrow. I'm not really sure, but death to me was just something normal, because that's all we saw. And so I had no idea that there were countries where kids were actually playing in the playground and they didn't have to fear a rocket flying over their heads, like countries like, Canada, where I ended up. And so my family escaped, and we ended up in the back of a truck with 5 other families. And I'm not talking normal truck, I'm talking about a truck with just 4 wooden walls that were barely holding on, and going through mountains for 3 days and 3 nights, and my mom carrying my 6-month-old brother in her arms, and just doing everything she could to try to be there for us as much as she could in the back of a old truck like that. So at that time, I also knew that we might not make it through the border. So we're trying to make it to Pakistan. Eventually we got there, and we were lucky. And then we stayed in Pakistan for a while as refugees, and finally we were very lucky to end up in Canada. And I asked my dad recently, I said, why did you choose Canada? Because with his level of education, and he was able to choose from countries like Australia, United States, anywhere in Europe and Canada. And he said, I chose Canada because I feel like it's a country where my kids can actually grow up and have the opportunities. And it's also very peaceful. And so I grew up there, and I started taking an interest in what was going on back home in Afghanistan, because I always felt like I could have been one of those girls living there. If we hadn't escaped, I would have been in their shoes. And so I always put myself in their situation, in their shoes. And as my interest grew, my interest grew. And so I started paying attention to the news, and I started doing my own research, finding out what's really going on in Afghanistan. And during the rule of the Taliban, it was probably the worst place. It actually was the worst place for a woman to live in. And over 90% of the people in Afghanistan were, and might still be, illiterate. And women were, the soccer stadium turned into an execution place, where they would, stone women to death for simple things like adultery. And this was very painful to watch, because the world was doing nothing. And the world continued to do nothing, even though, there were some leaders that were begging for help until 2001 happened. So at that time, it was just painful to see what was happening to my country and what was happening to the women and the children of this country, and no one doing anything about it. And I said, well, what can I do? And so I thought, I'm going to be a lawyer, and I'm going to, use law to go back there one day and, try to change things. And I was naive. I was young. I didn't know. I had, I was dreaming and things like that. But it's good to dream because, dreaming is what got me to where I am today. So, and a lot of people were like, oh, Mozhdah, stop the dreaming. You're one person. What can you do? And I just continued because that's my nature. That's what I do. And so I went to school and I realized, and my parents always reminded me, they're like, you have these opportunities that, most people don't have. And why don't you do something about it? Use the opportunities that Canada gives you to give back to a country that needs it. And I thought that's a perfect idea. Why not? So, I was a bookworm. I was a complete nerd. I didn't know anything about music at all. It never clicked. It never crossed my mind. I used to write poetry, but I didn't know. I didn't even know how to tune a radio. And so, in grade 7, when kids were talking about music and who their favorite singer is and what their favorite song is on the radio, I was like, oh, well, I can make friends this way. Maybe if I start listening to the radio and forcing myself to like music and memorize, I would sit, I went home one day and I said, Mom, how do you tune a radio? And she taught me. And so I started listening to the songs and trying to memorize, like forcing myself to memorize the name of the song and the actual singer. And so the next day, to try to fit in and make some friends, I go, hey, did you guys hear that song, by this singer? And I probably messed it up. And they're like, but at least I started a conversation. So that's how out of tune I was with music. And so when I was in high school and I was writing poetry, my mom said, well, you need an extracurricular activity. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? And she's like, I don't know, ballroom dancing, figure skating, you got to do something. And I said, well, I'm not girly enough for any of those things, so what do I do? And she's like, she goes, well, why don't you just take guitar lessons? I said, sure, that sounds good, just to get her off my back. And she sent me to her friend, and I was very shy and very scared. So she ends up, when I went to her friend's place, I'm expecting him to, hand me a guitar, and he goes, well, sing. And I go, what? I didn't come here to sing. But I was so shy and scared, I couldn't say anything. So I just, made a sound, and I was like, oh, that's horrible. Like, I scared myself. But, and so he tells me, oh, you have potential. I'm like, did you not just hear that? And he's like, your mom's my friend, I wouldn't waste your time or money or anything, so I'm telling you the truth. You do have potential. If you work hard enough, you'll actually get there. So, I did this to try to get my mom off my back, but at the same time, it kind of clicked because I was like, wait a minute, what is the best thing? If I'm forced to take vocal lessons, I might as well do something with this too. So, it was like a light bulb went on, and I said, people listen to lyrics of songs more than they would listen to a presidential speech. And if I become a lawyer, or even if I get into politics, it'll take me years before somebody actually really listens to what I have to say. But if I write a very catchy song with the appropriate lyrics that I want to get across to people as a message, I said, this is perfect. So that's when I became 100% determined and dedicated to this dream of mine. And so I started, I pretty much did 3 years of vocal lessons till I was almost ready vocally. And then I had my first song out, and I asked my dad, who is a poet, to write it. And he wrote a very patriotic and very fun song, very catchy and patriotic. So I said, okay, well, this got the attention of people. A couple months later, there was an acid attack on a few girls who were going home from school in Kandahar city. And this was 2008. And my dad at the time was working with the Canadian Forces in Kandahar. And he was so pained by what had happened that girls were now too scared to attend school because, that was the goal of the Taliban, to try to scare them off from getting an education. He came home And he had this really sad look in his eyes. And he said, I wrote this on the plane. He handed me the lyrics. And he said, I hope you can do something with this. And when I read the lyrics, I teared up. And I was like, this is so powerful. It's so politically driven, but so appropriate for the time. And not aggressive, but it kind of reminds everybody what women have done, and has mentioned all the names, or some of the names that of women who have made history in Afghanistan throughout the centuries and years. And there was a lady he mentioned who was almost, well, similar to the Joan of Arc. And there were poets and teachers, and these ladies have schools named after them, and they have streets named after them, and even towns. So I was like, these are amazing women. And I started doing my research on them and found out that there were so many women in the history of Afghanistan who just did amazing things. And he had compared them to the beautiful things. And instantly, the composition of the song, I just started singing it. They were just lyrics, and they turned into a song. And I was like, this is amazing. I guess it was meant to be. And so that's the song that got the attention of a lot of political figures in Afghanistan. And I was invited to the Embassy of Afghanistan in Washington, D.C. to perform this. And at the time, I ran into a couple of people. I didn't know who they were. And they ended up working at the White House alongside the president. So, I was privileged enough to be invited to the White House and perform for President Barack Obama as well, with his guests and the First Lady. And they asked me to sing that song on International Women's Day. And at the same time, I got an offer in Afghanistan to do a show. I was supposed to host the show Afghanistan's Got Talent. So I said, sure, why not? I just finished journalism, and so this is perfect. And when I went there, my mother, of course, went there with me after hesitating and not letting me go to Afghanistan. She finally agreed after 2 months of me begging her. And so she said to the producers, she goes, if my daughter is away from her friends and family, and from her safety and her country where she grew up, and she's going to be here, then we want to do something that's worth our while and everybody else's. So she said, have you heard of Oprah? And they go, what's Oprah? And so my mom, she tried to explain to them who Oprah was and how powerful she was and how much she's helped the people around the world. And surprisingly, I walked into a corner store, and out of all the DVDs that were, everything from every country, I see like a full set of the Oprah Show DVDs sitting right in front of me. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm seeing this collection of Oprah DVDs in Afghanistan, in this little corner store. And it was the only collection there. And so everything kind of, worked out the way it was supposed to. And it was amazing. Looking back now, I'm just like, everything that happened step by step to get everything going. And so I handed this DVD to the producer and director, and they loved it. They just completely put this show, Afghanistan's Got Talent, on the side, and they made the Mozhdah show. And we started working on, the concept and how it was going to be similar to the Oprah show. So they found me a Dr. Phil, and and we would discuss everything, before we went on stage, and we would make sure that, this conversation was going to go in the right direction. And of course, I would be the Oprah and just, ask him the questions and wait for his answers. And we started off talking about child abuse, because over 90% of children in Afghanistan get abused, either emotionally, physically, mentally. It was a topic that, and I took a lot of advice from my parents and my family over there. And so they gave me all the information I needed, along with some other people. And so we started off speaking about children and, child abuse and things like that, and how it affects, children growing up, and what are better ways to actually deal with children rather than abuse. And so we moved forward from that slowly into speaking about women, and speaking about domestic violence. And my parents had told me to be very careful with this topic and make sure that I start off getting into the hearts of people before I start, speaking about these situations, because it would affect my show, and it would probably either stop my show from happening, or it would stop it halfway, so I wouldn't reach my goal. So he said, you have to get into the hearts of people. You have to speak about, children, move on, and don't go right into women's rights, because you're going to look aggressive. So I said, okay. We started talking about domestic violence, relationships between men and women, husband and wife, and how that affects the kids, and how that affects themselves and their daily lives and their futures and their kids' futures. And then I started talking about, there was one topic that was divorce, and everybody said, oh, now you're pushing it, because divorce is not a subject to speak about in public, not even, within households. This is a taboo subject. It's not supposed to be spoken about, especially in public. And I said, I have to do this. And my uncle called me, he goes, you're making a mistake. You should not push it to that point. Your show is already very, it's already going outside of the limits of what you can talk about. And so I said, well, this is what I'm here for. I'm going to push it as much as I can. And right after my topic about divorce, and divorce over there, they thought that I was promoting divorce, and yet in my show I specifically said, a lot of Afghan people over there with 30 years of war, going through 30 years of war, a lot of people have lost, I guess it was completely civilized before, and during that time something has happened where they're lacking a lot of those common sense and a lot of these things. So I talked about divorce, and I said, a lot of Afghans worry about what other people think about them and their family, and they don't pay attention to what their kids are going through. And there's women and girls who are burning themselves to death, and that's their only form of suicide, and they're only a way out. So I said, wouldn't it be better to start paying attention to your own children and to your own daughters, and just, let them have the divorce, let them be separated, and instead of going through that. There was one girl who burned herself twice, and she failed, and she was in the hospital, and they asked her, what would you do differently next time? And her answer was, next time I would try to find a gun. And so it was very disturbing when I came across these stories, and that's why I said I had to do something. But unfortunately, right after the divorce topic, just a few days later, I was visiting my family, and there was a rumor that I had been killed, that they had cut off my nose and my ears and had severed my head and used me as an example, to show other women, this is what would happen to you if you continue to do this. And so I get from the TV station, the president of the TV station sent me an urgent email. He said, where are you? And he was panicking. And I said, I'm at home in Vancouver. I'm still here. And he goes, well, there's a horrible rumor right now. And my dad called at the same time, and my mom walked into my room and said, have you heard that there's something going on in Afghanistan? There's a rumor, a very horrible one. I was used to rumors, but not this severe. And so I said, that's okay, Mom, it's just a rumor, no big deal. So I'm on my way back 2 days later, and I switched my SIM card, and all of a sudden I have all these messages from the Canadian Embassy. And I said, it's urgent, please contact us before you come back to Afghanistan. And so I called, and they go, where are you? I said, I'm in London right now on my way back. And he goes, could you please turn around and head back to Vancouver? It's not safe for you to come back right now. And I said, oh, you mean the rumors? They're just rumors. You know, this happens to me all the time. There's always threats. There's always rumors. This is what I have to face. And they said, no, our intelligence believes that you're under direct threat and that you have to leave. It's not a rumor. And I said, at that time, I started panicking. I said, I have my whole life there now. I have my house, my cats, my friends and my show and everything that I've built for years. And how can you expect me to just drop all that and fly back to Vancouver? And they said, well, we did give you a warning. We can't do more than this, but we hope that you do the right thing. And so I did go back to Afghanistan. And I took precaution, but the last few days became pretty difficult because I was getting phone calls from government officials asking me to leave. I was getting phone calls from the chief of police of Kabul. Everybody, including the companies that I worked for at the TV station, they said, no amount of security will protect you at this point. You must leave. And so my parents flew in, and I went into hiding for 2 days at my uncle's house before I left, while some other people were packing my things. And it was a horrible time. I came back, I felt defeated, and this was, the second time that I was forced out of the country. So it hurt really bad. And I came here, I had a very, very difficult time. I didn't know what to do. I felt completely defeated and helpless, and something that I was so hopeful for had just completely vanished, just like that. And so I came here, and it took me a while to get over what had happened and to start, realizing that, yes, maybe I can make another set of goals. And just like I achieved all those things, maybe I can do it again. And so now I've started working with some people to get to a point where I can have my show from here, and I can produce my own show, and I can speak about the topics. I can find another Dr. Phil, and maybe have it aired, have it filmed here, and send it over. And if I can't be in the country physically, I can do it that way, or I can go back and do a couple of shows, pre-record a couple of shows and come back. And so these are all the options that I found. And then my mom goes, well, if they did this to you and they forced you out of the country and you do feel defeated, why don't you do it in a much bigger way? And I go, what do you mean? And she goes, well, if you get yourself out there in North America, you'll have a much bigger voice. And so I said, well, that's a really good idea, and I do thank my parents, because they always give me that extra push, to get to the next level. And it has been proven to me that dreams, you could make dreams into reality. And I am a big dreamer, and the things that I did dream about, the things that my mom dreamed about, they all came true, and so much more happened. I mean, I was expecting to have my show maybe 10 years from when I started my music career, but it happened within 2-3 years. So you never know what happens. And so now I just got an agent, and I'm like, I'll do exactly what I need to do. And if it takes me another 5 years to get back on my feet and do it in a much, much stronger way and get my voice heard across the world, and maybe not just help Afghanistan, but those countries where women are being oppressed and children are not being treated well, and places where they need help. I want to do that in a much bigger way now and help not just Afghanistan, but any country that needs it. And I'm thankful to those who have actually supported me and believed in me. And so that is my goal for the future, and that's what I'm working on currently. And so hopefully one day I can come here and tell you a story of how that's going. So that's it for my story, and I thank you all so much for listening. Now I'm gonna sing you a song. I'm not sure if you want to hear a song, the song that my dad wrote for me. Sure, yeah. So normally I'm used to, big stages and lots of people, but this is such a warm environment, and it's a little bit more nerve-wracking than what I'm used to as well. It's good. Oh yes, yeah. I can. Should I play some? Do we have time or? Yes, I'll do a little bit of I'll do a little bit of a cappella of the song that my dad wrote me, and it just says, "I'm a girl. I'm an Afghan girl. Please don't break my wings. Please don't break my honor." And it just mentions all the women who have done amazing things in the history of Afghanistan. So here goes. And I have to sing it a cappella because it's just a nice, warm, friendly environment. I'm sure you guys are okay with that. دخترم دختر افغانم من دختر ملک دل ایرانم من مشکن بال و پرم را مشکن مشکن تاج سرم را مشکن از تو مازاد چو آهو بدمن از تو مازاد چو آهو بدمن عشق دارم چو ملالای به وطن سردی هم نغمه چو بلبل به چمن زینب و ناز و مهری به سخن زینب و ناز و مهری به سخن دخترم دختر افغانم من دختر ملک دل ایرانم من. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you again, Darius, for having me here.